Indus Saraswati civilization. You've read about it in your history books. There are seals everywhere, and all those seals have symbols on top of it. Their script had not been deciphered as yet. Well, there is good news. No Rosetta Stone has been found for the Indus Saraswati civilization as yet, Brishti. So, how has the decipherment happened? Hi guys, namaste. Welcome to this episode of the Immortal India podcast. As you know, among my favorite subjects that we cover in the podcast are historical issues, particularly those historical issues that have been ignored or not studied well enough by our establishment historians. Sometimes an outsider's perspective brings in a fresh point of view. And this time we are going to be exploring the writing of the Indus Saraswati civilization. The best way to understand a civilization or a culture is to understand what they wrote about themselves. And that has been a problem with the Indus Saraswati civilization because their script had not been deciphered as yet. Well, there is good news in this space. And I can't think of anyone better than the guests that we have on the podcast today to comment on this. So, if I may introduce Bristi Guha. Bristi has a PhD in economics from Princeton University. After teaching abroad for some time, she now teaches economics at JNU. She's also very interested in ancient India. She publishes widely, both in economics and on historical issues on ancient India, both here and abroad. Brishti, thank you so much for joining the Immortal India podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolute pleasure. I first read of you in a Times of India article where you wrote about the script of the Indus Saraswati civilization. Now, we've all been assured that apparently it's an undecipherable script because no Rosetta Stone has been found for it. For those who don't know what a Rosetta Stone is, it is, it's how the Egyptian script was discovered. If you have one message which is written in multiple different scripts, and if one of those scripts have been deciphered, you can decipher the other script also, obviously. That's how the Rosetta Stone helped historians, modern historians, decipher the Egyptian script because there was one stone which had a message in Greek, if I'm not mistaken, Brishti, and
Right.
Persian and Egyptian hieroglyphic, which obviously opened up the Egyptian culture for us. No Rosetta Stone has been found for the Indus Saraswati civilization as yet, Brishti. So, how has the decipherment happened?
Okay, so this decipherment has been done by Yagyadevam, whose real name is Mr. Bharath Rao.
Hmm.
And he didn't use a Rosetta Stone. So his approach was based on a result by Claude Shannon, who's regarded as the father of modern information technology. And so this approach is based on code breaking. And uh, so he actually found during the process that the language of the Indus Valley civilization is Sanskrit. Now, this is not something he assumed. So sometimes people think that he may have assumed this, but he didn't. So, this approach itself guarantees that if you start assuming a wrong language, then you won't be able to get very far. Because suppose I have an inscription and it's just one symbol long, and I've assigned a wrong language, then I can assign any one letter word in that wrong language to that inscription, to that symbol. But when I get to longer symbols, then that meaning is no longer compatible in the longer symbols, with the longer inscriptions. So I will only get meaningless words. Okay, and so I'll get to know that my assumption was wrong, that language is incorrect. So now if I start with the correct language, then no matter how long the inscriptions are that I'm trying to read, I will be able to form grammatically correct phrases and I'll get whole sentences, and the sentences will mean something in that language which I've chosen. And what Shannon actually proved is that there is a mathematically defined threshold, and if you're able to decipher more than that threshold in that language and it's making sense, then your decipherment is proved to be correct and unique. Okay, so that would mean that your language is working and no other language would have worked. So that this is what happened when Yajnadevam started using Sanskrit. So he deciphered way beyond the threshold which Shannon had defined. And in fact, by now he has deciphered and translated the entire corpus of Indus inscriptions. So
Oh,
that's like about 3,700 different inscriptions.
and it's internally consistent
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes, and it's available publicly on his site, which is induscript.net.
Okay. If I can just, I'll just explain this in my understanding of simple terms for you guys. Essentially, the Rosetta Stone through which the Egyptian script was deciphered was like if you have one original document in English and you have a translation available of it in another script. It was actually as simple as that. But the Indus script, the way it has been deciphered, is imagine you have 3,800 documents. So, really long, lots of stuff to look at, but you have to do traditional code breaking, okay, which can be done through mathematic formulae, which is precisely what Mr. Rao did, used code breaking a technique, a mathematical technique. And how this works is you make an assumption. If the assumption is wrong, moment you hit 5, 10, 15 documents, it stops working. Because say you assumed that actually this symbol is English. These symbols are describing English. And you realize after 5, 10 documents, it becomes nonsensical. Then it doesn't work. Then try another language, try another language, try another language. And then he tried Sanskrit, and actually it's worked across all those 3,700 documents. Now, you'd be thinking, where are those 3,700 documents? How come there are so many Indus Saraswati civilization documents? You've read about it in your history books. There are seals everywhere, and all those seals have symbols on top of it. So, what Mr. Rao has deciphered is that those symbols actually have meanings. And for those who've read my books would know, I had an interpretation of the Indus Saraswati civilization. I assumed that it was a hieroglyphic script because that's what I'd read in my young history books. I'm delighted to say that I was wrong. And Mr. Rao is probably right that it is actually Sanskrit. So, Brishti, we can dive right in. And and I know this subject becomes slightly controversial because it is believed that the so-called Indus Saraswati civilization was originally quote unquote Dravidian or South Indian, and Aryans came and invaded them, and then they moved south. And the North Indians are descendants of those Aryans, South Indians are descendants of those Dravidians. Uh, Genetic research puts, questions this because actually there's heavy intermingling all across. But you are a Bengali, so you don't have a dog in this fight at all. You're not North Indian or South Indian. You're East Indian. So
That's right.
you're an impartial observer. Okay, so coming into this, on the seals itself, can you take us through what exactly did Mr. Rao decipher and how is it internally consistent? Take us through some of those seals. And some of them are seals that we have seen from our childhood in our history books. And suddenly they actually mean something.
Yes, sure. So maybe I'll start off by telling you that it's not just seals which have Indus script on them, it's also bangles. So there are ornaments with Indus writing on them. And this immediately tells us something about women in IBC. Okay, so we can tell that they were literate because if you're not literate, why would you buy a bangle with writing on it? You won't be able to read it.
Good
Okay,
point.
and I've actually read the field reports of archaeologists who worked at Mohenjo-Daro, and they found a lot of stoneware bangles with writing on them. And there's an archaeologist there named Ute Franke, and she actually says that the process of making these was very labor intensive. So craftsmen had to use a specific tool for this, and they had to first write and then they had to fire the bangles. And she even says that they would not do this unless there was sufficient demand for these particular inscribed bangles. So, what this also suggests is that these were more expensive than ordinary bangles. Okay, so Women
What this
are
also suggests,
deliberately
what this also suggests is that even in that ancient era, Indian women were able to make the Indian men work very hard for them.
okay, so yeah, so it also suggests that they had some specific purpose in buying these bangles with writing on them, and they're even paying a higher price for them. So what I'm going to argue is they were using it to partly to assert their identity, and for that we have to look at what was actually written on them.
Uh, so, Brishti, let us jump straight in to the seals and the bangles, which have inscriptions on it. So, if you can just start.
Okay, sure. So I'm showing you the slide of a bangle which was found in Balakot, and the Sanskrit here says Ahana, which means slayer. Okay, so this is immediately reminding us of the warrior women in Sinoli. So,
Correct.
in the Sinoli excavation, they found some skeletons of warriors who were buried along with their swords and shields. And they found many female skeletons there, and they were buried with very distinctive shields. Okay, in addition, it also takes us to the Rig Veda, where a woman warrior named Vishpala is mentioned in several hymns. Now, Vishpala lost a leg during a battle, but she did not get scared. She got an iron leg replaced, and then she went back into battle.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were these women warriors in the past. Now, I'll show you another
Well,
bangle.
very interesting. Before we jump to the next one, because it was found at Balakot, where in modern times also there was a slayer, and
Right.
uh, and those among my viewers who don't know about Sinoli, just Google and read on it. It was a site in modern Uttar Pradesh where a fascinating archaeological find. Was done very recently. Chariots dating back to 4,000 years ago. Brishti, please correct me if I'm wrong. Horse chariots. Huh? So it's like so, which means bang in the middle of peak Indus Saraswati civilization. The next,
So the next bangle was found in Mohenjo-Daro, and it says Impa. So Impa is the Sanskrit word and that means his protector.
hmm,
So this suggests that a woman was the bodyguard for a man. And this actually has parallels in later Sanskrit literature. Now, there is a Sanskrit novel written in the 8th century by Banbhatta, who was the court poet of King Harsha. And the novel is called Kadambari. There is a character named Patralekha who accompanies the prince into the battlefield, and her job is to shield him. So she acts as his shield and she's protecting him.
yeah, and even Chandragupta Maurya, from what I've read in history books, had women bodyguards. Rajendra Chola's and Rajaraj Chola's empire also had women regiments, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Tradition in India.
Yes. So, women who were in these professions wanted to assert that in their ornaments. But what I find is that this was also true of women who were leading more domestic lives, because some of the bangles say Ra, which means giver. Now, we can interpret this in two ways. So, one is that the woman may have been the one allocating resources within the household. This reminds us of a fascinating passage in the Mahabharata, which says that Draupadi was actually the treasurer of the royal family. So she knew all about the expenditure and revenue. Whenever any of her husbands went on a trip, she knew exactly how many elephants have gone with him, how many horses, how many gifts are being sent. And even when they were poor and when they were in exile, they had scarcer resources, so she would supervise the allocation of those resources among their dependents and their uninvited guests. Okay, so IVC women might have been doing something similar on a smaller scale. In fact, there are seals saying Asha Bhajya, which means food to share. So, probably after meeting the needs of their own family, they set aside some food for less privileged people. And a second interpretation is that they could have been donating something for causes like building something, because even in later times, what we find is that in epigraphy, they have a lot of evidence of women both from royal families and ordinary families donating to the building of temples. So if you're from an ordinary family, you cannot finance the entire temple, but maybe you're giving enough money for one pillar. So then these would be recorded. So something similar could have been happening in IBC times. So, what I find really fascinating is that in other ancient civilizations at that time, nothing of this sort happened. So, women there were buying ornaments only to enhance their beauty. But in the IVC, there was a secondary purpose, which is of asserting their identity. And this also suggests that women in the IVC were quite confident and assertive, and this goes very well with the dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro, the so-called dancing girl. I don't think personally she was one, but she looks extremely assertive in her posture. And by the way, she wore 24 bangles on one arm and 3 or 4 on the other. So if she had been in her real life, I think she would have worn a bangle inscribed with the word Ahana, which means leader. And actually, one such bangle was found.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so I've talked a little bit about women, but maybe I can move on to gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because the seals tell us a lot about them as well. So, there is one seal where we see a woman and she has a tiger on either side of her, and she's holding back the tigers and controlling them. And there is Indus text on the top, and this reads Ramana Shasana, okay, which means, oh, pleasing Punisher. So this actually reminds me of Sheravali Ma, because Ma Durga is worshipped in the form of Sheravali in North India. And so it's reasonable to think she was taming tigers.
Yeah. And Brishti, in just a sidelight from my end, because I had seen this seal earlier, and in Secret of the Nagas, the second book of the Shiva trilogy, I show goddess Sati fighting a tribe of lions and a liger, which is a lion and a tiger mix. It was actually inspired by this, because my interpretation was she's actually fighting those
Yes, she's
tigers.
fighting, even in this seal, she's fighting them. She's controlling them basically.
So I interpreted that into Secret of the Nagas.
Okay, great.
Ah.
Okay, so another thing we find is lots of evidence of the worship of both Shiva and Kamdev. Okay,
Yeah.
so this includes the very famous Pashupati seal. So the text on top of the seal reads Ashasana Mana, which means O honorable punisher of Kama. And of course, we are familiar with the rest of the seal, that there is a yogic figure and there are wild animals all around him. So Shiva was, of course, the ultimate yogi, and he was also the lord of wild animals, which is why he is called Pashupati. And in plenty of the other seals, they refer.
But Brishti, if I can just add, because it says, "O honorable punisher of Kama," a very clear story from the Shaivite Puranas is Lord Shiva punished Kamdev because he disturbed him while he was in dhyan, while he was in meditation. He opened his third eye and punished him. So, O honorable punisher of Kama, this ties in to the Puranic stories of Lord Shiva as well. So this changes entire. So actually, that's what is being referred to.
Yeah, and in fact, I was familiar with it from Kumar Sambhava of Kalidas. There, because there the story is there that he burns up Kama.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is also referenced in a number of other less famous seals, like they just call him Hata Madana or Madanam Hatakara. And as you know, Madana is one name for Kamdev.
Kamdev, yeah.
So, this shows that these stories go way back to the IVC, and both of them were deities at that time.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, shows the continuity.
Yeah, exactly. There are also mentions of Vedic deities on the seals, including Indra, Usha, who's the Vedic goddess of dawn, and Surya. For example, there is a seal which just says Chakra. So we know Chakra is another name for Indra.
Right.
And there are other seals which talk about him more indirectly, like, oh, lightning throwing killer. So I'm just telling you the English now.
Yeah.
And Usha is mentioned by name. So there are, the seals say things like Usha Mattani, which means joyful dawn.
Wow.
And Surya is referred to in a very poetic
But
way. So,
as a separate thing,
yes.
I think I'm going to present a gift to my mother with Usha written in that Indus Valley script because her name is Usha.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So Surya is called Tamak Dara, which means cleaver of darkness.
Mm.
Okay, and there is a lot of reference to Vedic yagyas and havans. So people discuss how much offering they gave at havans, and there is one seal which says Dahanai, which means by the three fires. So this is a reference to the Yajurvedic fires. Like we are supposed to maintain three separate fires. One is the Ahavaniya for sacrificing to the gods, and one is the Ganapatya for the householder fire, and the third is the Dakshinagni, which is for offerings to ancestors. So this goes very well with that.
Amazing. Amazing.
We also can tell a lot about the daily life of the people. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah. So I'll start with the Dholavira signboard. So the context is that Dholavira is a very important fort belonging to the IBC. And the signboard is a huge signboard which can be seen from a distance, and it was on one of the gates to the city. And it was also made of gypsum, so it glowed in the dark. So the text here reads Raka Vararaka Araras, which means gem of chosen gems entrance. So what this is telling us is that if ships were coming to Dholavira at night, first of all, that boat would be lit up. So they would be able to land safely. And then they could actually read the sign and they would realize where the gems quarter is located. So if they want to trade in gems, they can just head there. Okay, so
So clearly that I symbol is Ra. That along with this we will put down the what each symbol corresponds to.
maybe, for that you should actually check the site because most of them are actually right to left.
Right.
So that should be kept in mind.
Because it's a seal. So is that because it's a seal and it has to be mirror image and you have to stamp it somewhere?
I think they started writing from the right, and then, if space became a constraint, they became sort of cramped at the left, and then sometimes they went on to the next line.
Ah.
But it was very difficult to carve, so which is why they deliberately try to keep it very short.
Very short. But to be fair, in ancient Indian script, Kharoshti is actually written right to left, right? So we did have a right to left script as well.
Yeah, so I wasn't aware so much about Kharoshti, but yeah, since we were talking about international trade in the context of Dholavira, I'll also just show this other seal which says Sahasam Yanam Anara, which means boldness for the sea voyage, O breath giver. Okay, so that suggests a context where people are going off on a sea voyage and they're asking for blessings and protection before that. Now,
Yeah.
now,
Sahas.
yeah, this ties in so nicely with the evidence from Mesopotamian tablets, which mention a thriving international trade with the IBC. And at the same time, there have been archaeologists like John Mark Kenower, and he's done a lot of work on this, also on the IBC trade links with Bahrain and Oman. And he's also discussed how there was a colony of IBC traders living in Mesopotamia, and they actually brought their families with them. So the reason we know the families came with them is they found children's toys in that colony, which are identical to the toys found in Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Okay. And in fact, even the Mesopotamians recorded that there is a colony of the IBC over here. Okay. So I'm just guessing that, at one time we were also pioneers in this ocean voyage and ocean trade, and at that time we must have felt scared and we must have felt the need to ask for divine protection. Yeah, and another pretty interesting thing is horses. So there is a ample mention of horses in IBC seals. Okay, so I'll show one seal here which says Hayavan Jana, which means horse owning people. And there are so many seals which mention horses. So whenever somebody has a horse, he calls himself possessor of horses, Mai. Okay. And they even have a longer seal where they say, "O ancestor, strengthen indeed the delights of possessing horses." So the Sanskrit for that delights of possessing horses is Ashvamodan. So they are using pretty common words for horse like Ashwa, Haya, Maya, Vajin. Okay. So now the reason I'm mentioning this is lots of people think that there were no horses in the IBC. But now we know that obviously that wasn't right.
True, it's there in their seals, and this is one of the things that's used to kind of run that propaganda that horse chariot riding, Aryans came and and killed and conquered this area. Though there's no evidence of any destruction or warfare, they've been searching for 100 years, they still haven't found. Yeah, and you find horses at IVs.
Yeah, in fact, lots of people think their sole reason for thinking that Vedic people and Harappan people were different is that they think, oh, horses are mentioned in the Rig Veda. But now we see, well, horses are also mentioned in the IBC.
Correct.
Okay. And this actually now there's a lot of other evidence for it as well. For example, I was reading S.R. Rao's report on the Lothal excavation, and he talks about finding a chess set there. So this is for Chaturanga, right?
Yeah.
You know it originated here. And they have knights, so they have horses, which they're actually incorporating them into a game. They're so fond of them. And now, since a lot of IBC sites have been excavated, they've also found lots more horse bones, which date back to very ancient times. I think about 3500 BC.
Wow.
And quite apart from the issue that there were also indigenous horses, we could also have easily imported horses because the IBC had trade links with Central Asia as well.
Correct.
Okay, so basically, this whole idea that we didn't know about horses or we didn't have horses is not right.
True.
Yeah,
It's so fascinating what Mr. Rao has done. What is that website? I would encourage all of you, all my viewers, to go check that website. What's the name of that website?
Induscript.net.
Induscript.net. Do check it out. This needs, to be spread even more. It needs to come into our books. We need to realize, that the key has been unlocked. We can actually hear the Indus Saraswati people speak themselves. We can read what they wrote, and they were us. They were us. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Bristi, is there anything else you need to add? But I think this has been a wonderful episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If there's any further research that you do, anything that you find, we'd love to do another podcast again. I'm sure my viewers would love to see it. Those of you who enjoyed this episode, please follow Bristi's research as well. Bristi, what's your social media handle?
Okay, I so I'm on X.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can just look for me there, and
Okay.
I'm also on Instagram.
Okay, so just search for Brishti Guha. She is a scholar from Princeton and she's a teacher at JNU. Fascinating insights based on Mr. Rao's research on the Indus Valley script, something that is working across more than 80% of 3,700.
He's now done 100%.
Whoa, okay, he's done 100%.
Yeah.
And it appears that the Indus seals, the Indus bangles, it's a script to speak Sanskrit. If you like this episode and episodes such as this, hit like and subscribe below so that you can receive notifications when our next episode launches. Thank you so much for joining Bristi and me in this fascinating episode of the Immortal India podcast. Namaste. Thank you.